Alright, it's been a while since I've updated my Instagram on the car. We're working on the car. Alright, I got the front crash structure back on. I am mounting the radiator today, getting the radiator in. So, kind of explain what I'm doing here. I'm using riv nuts. I've got some M8 riv nuts, riv nut tool, 8mm hardware, washers, lock washers, that kind of stuff. All the good stuff here. So I've already got, what I did was I took the front part of the crash structure off. I used the old frame rails that we cut to make this new crash structure. I used that to measure where the radiator support was from the factory. I got a factory radiator cradle. All right, this part here, it's GM. I want to try and keep, you know, some factory stuff for serviceability, right? If it breaks, if something happens, it's easy to get factory parts. So instead of making something custom for that, I wanted to reuse a lot of OEM parts. They're cheap, they're easy to find. Serviceability, it's good on a race car. So what I did was I measured where I needed to install a riv nut. I've got one riv nut there. Come over to the other side here, another riv nut there. And then I'm just going to press this up against the subframe there, mark my hole there, drop the radiator support, drill 2 more holes, and then, yeah, riv nut it in place. I don't need a tremendous amount of strength on the radiator support. Other than the radiator, nothing is going to be mounted off of this cradle. My oil cooler is going to be mounted off of the front of the crash bar. The splitter is going to be mounted in 4 places using the Professional Awesome quick release mounts off of the crash structure. So the radiator support, I figured riv nuts, M8 riv nuts would be plenty strong enough to hold the weight of the radiator. That's it. So I'm going to get those other 2 riv nuts in, get that installed, and then I'll touch base with you guys again once I get the radiator set in there and get some hoses on. All right. I have got everything back together. Oh, let me turn the camera around. Here we go. Front crash structure is on the car. OEM radiator support is riv nutted in. Got all this bolted back together. This is just stitch welded, the same as it was from factory, which is why in the crash, the front crash structure ripped out. This is designed to be a weak point here. So in case of front end impact, it'll rip out here. That's why we reused the OEM frame rail section here. So we could stitch weld it back in place so that this structure is basically consumable, right? So if this gets in an accident again, this will act the same way it did the first time. This will rip out. And it'll save the frame, suspension, motor, all the stuff behind it. So, yep, got a radiator support in. And now it's time to drop the radiator, set up the hoses, and yeah, get the cooling system filled. All right, so I got the air cleaner off, or cold air intake. Thermostat housing here. Water pump. I got the radiator set in place. All right, so we're working with the factory mounts. There are rubber insulators, little rubber insulators that go in those holes on the factory radiator support, and the radiator has a sort of a pin that slides in. I ordered those from Rock Auto, again, OEM, and they won't be here till Monday, so I just got it set in place right now. Those aren't in there. And then I also or come up with some idea to hold the top of the radiator here. The radiator comes with some brackets that are for something. I don't know what they're for. I didn't study the factory radiator before buying this because I don't know where the factory radiator is. It's somewhere at Lime Rock. I don't know. All the stuff from the wreck they put in the car, and somehow the radiator disappeared, which is fine, less that I needed to throw away. But I'm going to have to figure something out, right? There's some hole here. I'm assuming a bracket goes in there. One of those brackets I got goes in there. And then I can weld something or bolt whatever off of the crash structure here to kind of hold the top of the radiator in place. So anyways, I'm going to get the hoses on here and kind of get them on the radiator as well. So kind of get them, make sure everything fits together and everything works together. And then I will disassemble. Once I know everything's all set, I'll disassemble and wait for parts to come in, those insulators, and then some coolant lines, things like that. All right, one thing here, I got these radiator hoses. Got them out, gonna get them on the car. They come with these clamps. They are worm clamps, and they're not the first, right? The ridges here on the outside of the worm clamp. The point of that is so that the a typical worm clamp will dig into the silicone of the hose, which you don't want. So they come with these. I am not going to use these. I don't like those. I use T-bolt clamps, right? So I got some of these Vibrant T-bolt clamps. They are more of a constant tension clamp. So the cooling system expands and contracts as it gets hot and cold with heat cycles on the motor. A constant tension clamp, a T-bolt clamp. Factory has those constant tension clamps that you kind of squeeze and slide on. Those are decent. I prefer a T-bolt clamp. It's much stronger, and it's going to allow some expansion and contraction with the heat cycles of the motor. So I'm going to throw these away and use these Vibrant T-bolt clamps. All right, so I got the radiator hoses in. I am not going to hook them up to the radiator right now, just because I don't have a good reason. But I'm not going to do it right now. No, because I still got to mount the radiator fully, right? I got to mount the top. I also, the Vibrant hose clamps, the T-bolt clamps that I had for the hoses were one size too small. I measured the outside diameter of this, but I didn't take into account the expansion after I get them on the water pump and the thermostat housing. So they were a little bit too small. The outside diameter of this is 1.4 inches. Those clamps were supposed to work up to 1.43, which is cutting it close already. But the next size up, 1.5 something. And I didn't take into account the expansion of the hose, basically, as it slides over the water pump, thermostat housing, and then also the radiator side too will be the same. So I'm just gonna have to get 4 new clamps, no big deal. A couple days to get those. But yeah, this is set up right. The hoses are routed for the most part where they're gonna be. The radiator is set in place. All right, and then I am contemplating, right, since I'm using the OEM radiator, I might use the factory ducting, radiator ducting. It's a plastic piece, it weighs a couple pounds, and it bolts right up to the radiator, and then basically ducts to the grill, so I don't have to make my own ducting. So I'm contemplating using that. It's a couple $100 from GM, you know, not a big deal, but I feel like I can just get some sheet aluminum and make my own ducting. That'll probably weigh even less than the plastic. You know, the plastic stuff has OEM mounts, which obviously with the aftermarket crash structure, it'll mount to the radiator fine. But if it's supported from the crash structure, which I don't know if it is, I won't be able to use that. So at that point, I might as well just make my own out of sheet aluminum. So I'm jumping back and forth between those ideas. I'm not sure which one I'm going to do yet. I'm kind of leaning more towards the aftermarket, the sheet aluminum, but we'll see. Either way. Anyways, I'm going to get this done. I have one thing to add on to this radiator. This is the oil cooler adapter block from Improved Racing. All right, so it's a really cool piece. Here. All right, so it's a thermostatic oil cooler adapter. It removes the factory heat exchanger. You got dash 10, I think I did. These are dash 8. I've got dash 8 to dash 10 adapters. right here. And then I've got dash 10 AN lines that run from this block here to the oil cooler I'm going to be running in the front. So this is thermostatic. This has the 200 degree thermostat in it. So the oil will not flow through this, which means it'll bypass the oil cooler until the oil reaches 200 degrees. So this won't affect warm-up time. One thing about that too is when you do oil changes, right, unless you run the car and get oil up to over 200 degrees before you drain it, you're not going to be draining the oil cooler. However, I do oil changes after every how often I change the oil, for the most part, I think is what keeps it clean. So that's fine. This will prevent the oil cooler from draining, which means the factory fill of 10 quarts or 9.8 quarts will still remain. I won't have to do the math on how much comes out based on the oil cooler, right? It's just not going to drain the oil cooler. So it's going to be about 4 feet each direction, so about 8 foot, 8 feet of dash 10 line, and then the oil cooler itself, which is a dual pass oil cooler. So it's going to hold, I would assume, at least a couple quarts. So the thermostatic valve from Improved Racing will prevent that from draining, which is fine. But yeah, it's a cool piece. Nice piece. It comes with a gasket for the back, right? And it replaces the stock heat exchanger, which I know I was still running the stock heat exchanger, but it's time attack, right? Not wheel to wheel. So I don't need to run 30 minutes straight with, basically with a checkered flag in time attack, right? I ran this factory heat exchanger, which limited me for sure. But I could run, probably on a hot day, 2-3 laps, and then I'd have to do, a cool down lap, and then I could go back another couple laps. So, yeah, it was a pain in the ass, but you know what? It's a time attack car. To keep the tires in the right window anyway, I'm not running, 5, 6, 7 laps in a row anyway, unless it's a test day. But yeah, I would sacrifice that before. Now with a big dual pass oil cooler and this piece here, I don't have to cool the oil down, right? If I want to fucking send it and just do a full 30-minute session as hard as I can, I'm going to be able to, which is nice. It also comes with hose clamp and a little cap for a port on the radiator. This is a factory drop-in radiator, or aftermarket OE drop-in radiator, whatever. And so there's a port that ran a coolant line to the factory heat exchanger. That's getting plugged. So this comes with the Improved Racing kit. It's got a freeze plug or a coolant plug that threads into the side of the block, removing the factory heat exchanger, and then, like I showed you before, the two -8 to -10 fittings for the Improved Racing piece to go to the lines, and then gasket and miscellaneous hardware. So yeah, pretty cool piece. Relatively inexpensive too. Improved Racing makes some really cool shit. Basically, this is what I'm after right now. I'm not gonna run the oil cooler right now. I'm gonna do that another day. I'm just gonna kind of get the radiator in place. And part of that is capping off that piece. So I'm gonna get that on there.